Eric.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I had to run to pick up my son, so I'm in the car, but I'm here.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for joining, though.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that you had some people.
Yeah. Susan's not here, and Lee actually mentioned that he won't be able to make it either. So, yeah, it might be a small group today.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I probably got about 3/4 of the way through the last week's recording, and so I got some of the updates there, but still didn't make it all the way. So
Okay, no worries. I think last week was mainly just a lot of discussing some of the other items that Lee had added, and then figuring out like which ones to focus on. But I don't think we've discussed like an order or who might be picking those up. So maybe we can talk about that today.
yeah, I think it'd be ideal because I know that there's people, and I don't know if they've ever joined, but I know that there are people that work, I think either with or under Shiwei, who were asking me about it, and they were looking at the repo and said, oh, you have a bunch of issues, but we don't have like a roadmap or like a release tag where you can be like, oh yeah, this issue belongs to this number and this issue belongs to this number. So it's probably worth going through and kind of deciding, okay, here's like the things that we want to include in XYZ.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we should do that. Hopefully I'm using this right because I don't see I don't see a waiting room anywhere. Let's see.
Well, it's not it just got to 4, so you might, if people are joining, just trying to get on early because I've never used Zoom on my phone or on CarPlay. So
okay, got it. Okay. Hi, Jimmy.
Hello.
Looks like it might be a small group today. Susan is on vacation and Lee won't be able to make it, and not sure if Sajay will be able to make it either. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have some questions anyway, so we'll wait till other people join.
I also saw in last week's recording, there was someone was asking about changing the meeting time, and they talked about a doodle or like a poll to see if people cared about what time. Do you know if we did that?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either.
Because I could be on team earlier in the day.
I mean, I think I'm one of the only people on the East Coast, right? I mean,
I think you're the only on the East Coast, but we did last week have people from Europe, and we have people who might start contributing, at least from Microsoft, who are in Shanghai. So they would probably also prefer either like early our time or really late our time. So.
I'm not sure how much later I can go. So,
Yes,
if it goes that way, then I'll have to just catch up on the notes, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'll have to see like what time in the morning would be potential for like not terribly late for the other side of the globe.
Okay, I guess we can get started. So yeah, I have a few items that I just put up on the board, but don't really have much like specific today to discuss. So if anyone has any more information or has any more updates or more questions, like feel free. We should have quite a bit of time for that. But I guess we can start by going over some of the open PRs. We have quite a few actually, all of the dependency updates. So let's see. So yeah, so the first three are all like Kubernetes updates. So these three are mainly just used by the Kubernetes secrets auth provider. So I think it should be okay. There seem to be all just patch updates. So I'll go through them. I'll try it out and make sure the basic scenario is still working, and then just merge them in. Shouldn't be an issue there. And then the next one is one that Susan opened up. This one's just adding an actual template for PRs. So now we'll have like structured descriptions and then focus on testing and some checklists to follow. So this one is pretty straightforward, and I think we can merge it once she comes back. She can merge it. Let's see. We have someone else.
I was gonna say if she already addressed the comment, then we could probably if you want to merge it, you could probably merge it because the two of us have reviewed.
Yeah, there was like one like small spelling thing that I commented, but I approved it anyway. Maybe I don't know if she wants to address it or not. It's not really that important, but there is one outstanding comment. So yeah. Okay. So I guess for now I'll just leave it open. Is that cool, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if it's just the template, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Cool. Another one of these, I think this one's been sitting for a while. I think it should be totally fine, but I guess we just need to go through the motion of checking it out and then making sure it's running. But one thing that'll be helpful is once we have this PR, the end-to-end test merged in, we will have some more confidence that we're not like breaking basic scenarios with these things. So that will definitely be useful for that. And then this one is the end-to-end test. I think it's good to go. I approved it again because I think we've gone through a round of review. I don't know if Susan was waiting for something or if we should just go ahead and merge it. Does anyone have any thoughts or?
I think if I hadn't looked at it yet, but I think if it's gone through a round of review comments, I think if you reviewed it and I looked at part of it, I didn't get all the way through, but I'm happy to just merge and then if there's anything in the future, we can change it again just to keep progress.
Okay. Then I'm just gonna do it right now then, might as well. Let's see. Cool, that one's done. And then this one has been sitting. We're gonna wait on a little bit longer for the RC1 update. I think once we have a registry that is like Azure Container Registry that can work with this, then it would be more helpful. We don't want to be breaking some existing walkthroughs. So we can just wait on this for now. And yeah, I think that's it for the PRs. So going back to any agenda discussion items. So I went through last week's recording, and I think the prioritization was kind of discussed on how we want to address some of the issues that Lee brought up. But the first one is the supporting the CRDs for Ratify. I think Lee was looking for some responses and feedback on it. Eric, did you have a chance to like go over it, or do you have any thoughts on it?
I looked at some of the stuff that he proposed. I think the one thing that was interesting to me, he had talked about having the essentially having Ratify configurations confined like per name, being able to define them per namespace. Which one I thought that was like worthwhile for like multi-tenant clusters. It made sense. The only caveat that I had was with gatekeeper external the information that can be passed from gatekeeper to currently, and I think there were plans to update that interface to allow for more flexibility, but didn't know that was already landed or not. So, I guess can ask Lee if he's willing to look or
Sorry, Eric, I think you're breaking
I
up.
think it was
Yeah, I thought it was just my audio.
am I back now?
Yep,
Yeah, better.
Hello?
yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So okay, so I don't know where you lost me, but
So you were saying something to the
his
effect of,
proposal. Okay.
sorry, there must be like a delay or something, but so, I mean, you were saying something to the effect of one of the things that Lee wanted was per namespace configuration of Ratify. And you thought that was good for multi-tenancy, but it seemed like you had some concern with respect to how that would be done.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So gatekeeper, we're limited in the data that we can, the interface between gatekeeper and external data providers. And since Ratify doesn't know the namespace, but gatekeeper does. And so we would need to enable that use case, we would need to wait until we could implement it, but it wouldn't be useful until gatekeeper supports the ability for us to add additional arbitrary information in the external data request. So, I mean, from a priority perspective, we could start work on that, but it might be worth looking at when that might be available from gatekeeper. I think last I checked, it was 3.9. Also, sorry for the noise.
No worries. So to me, it doesn't sound like a huge priority if it's currently blocked by gatekeeper. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, it would be blocked by gatekeeper, at least currently. I think 3.9 is out though. I don't know if we've tried with it though.
We can just check. Let's see. Okay, looks like we're on 3.8.1. Okay, so it's in beta then. Okay. Okay, cool. So I guess we can follow up maybe next week or something to see if we're unblocked by this. But I guess for now we can note down that we're blocked by that and then revisit that. The other issue was using the executor with cache. I know we had some questions on how we would handle that with like configuration updates and when we would invalidate the cache. I don't know if we've discussed this anymore. Anyone have any more thoughts on this? Okay, I think Susan was working on the configuration update, so I can follow up with her on that, but maybe she can also pick up and look into this as well. But I think switching over to the cache because it already exists might be easier, but then we need to consider like how that would gel with what her changes are going to be for the updates for configuration. But okay, we can circle back on this.
I think there was an item to make sure that we at least log the cache, right? That we're using the cache. So that should at least give some insights.
Yeah, that was my biggest concern, was that we at least logged how we're doing, if we're making calls outside of Ratify or if we're hitting the cache. The main reason is because of the interval of the gatekeeper audit scans. Just wanted to make sure that, you know, we can prove that we're not leaving Ratify, because it becomes an issue compounded by how many clusters we're going to be running, how many policies are going to be hitting the data provider. And if we're really, you know, I mean, we could look at it from a network perspective, but I'd like to see the logging as well.
Okay. That makes sense. Cool. Anyone have any more thoughts on this, or we can move to the next one? The next one was the enabling the service-to-service communication using gRPC. So there were two things. So one, Eric, I think you had some thoughts on how we would actually implement this using the bidirectional gRPC. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can try. Sorry, I was trying to make it home before the massive eruption, but
no worries. We can circle back to this if it's easier.
Yeah, if we're still on in like 5 minutes, then I can do that.
Yeah. No worries. So I think going off of this also was we should gather some sort of performance implications. I know Lee was going to look into what it would mean in cluster latency wise. One thing to add on to in cluster latency, when I was doing the timing benchmarks for the auth provider, I was also timing the Kubernetes secret provider, which calls the API server and in order to resolve the secrets. And I was noticing that it's pretty fast. It's like 30 or 40 milliseconds. So it shouldn't be as much of a concern, but we can continue to look into that. And then, yeah, that's apart from that, I don't really have any other agenda items. Jimmy, you said you had some questions, or actually, Sajay, do you want to go for it?
So Akash, are you taking care of the Dependabot items? I just didn't get a chance to follow.
Yes, actually, we went through that in the first part of the meeting.
There are a couple of items that are showing up under the Dependabot alerts. If you, you can't wait. It's under security.
Security. Okay.
Yeah. So you can take a look at them. It's most likely updates.
Okay. Is it?
Oh, that's funny. Why am I seeing it in your functionality? Okay.
So those are separate from the PRs. These are just the updates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll follow up with you on these. It's basically it's updating OPA and things like that. So there is most of these might get solved by the updates that you can push through. So will you be kind of like pushing this through, because I think there is a vulnerability in OPA and things like that we need to address.
Yeah, I can push that through. If I can get
cool.
access to it, I can address that. These first three I'm gonna push through probably tomorrow. Just need to quickly check they don't break anything. But
okay, sounds good. Thanks. That's all I had.
Okay. Let's see. Jimmy, did you said you had some questions?
Yeah, so I'm getting ready to submit a PR about the charts, how they decide to create a how we're deciding to create a service account or not. Currently, we are going off of a few things. Let me pull up the code here. But so if we look at the deployment resource, do you want me to share my screen or did I just talk about it? Either way.
I can, let me make you host and then you can share your screen.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, I think you should be the host now.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. And can you guys see my code?
Yep,
Yep.
yes we can.
Is it big enough to read?
Yep, I can read it.
Okay. So the thing that's important to me right now is this part right here where we're deciding whether to insert the service account or not. And I was adding this piece, the service account name, because we were currently just looking at is the Azure workload identity client ID there, or is the service account create set to true? But I think for AWS at least, we need to be able to decide on the name being available as well. So one of the reasons is because we have to, the way that we create workload identity, I guess you would call it workload identity. We call it IAM roles for service accounts, but we need to create so what I'm saying here is that we need to create the service account outside of the Helm chart access or the Helm chart orchestration. So what would happen here is with this value here, it would insert the service account name, but it wouldn't create it because we need to be able to create it, attach a role to it, and that role gets created in line as well. And then it gets the OIDC IDP trust added to it as well. So it's trusted for individual cluster. So that's the main thing that I need to make sure that our Ursa at least can get IAM tokens assigned to the Ratify pod when it comes up. So I tested it. It seems to work. I'm going to submit a PR for it. And that's like the first step to getting the Ratify pod at least enabled to use permissions for AWS operations. And then beyond that, I need to start looking at what internally, how are you getting credentials? But that's the first thing. Any questions?
No, let's go for it.
Okay, so I'll submit a PR here, and I wanted to submit one earlier, and so that we could just review it. But I'll submit it here either tonight or tomorrow morning, and then the next thing I'm going to do is start looking at what, if anything, I need to submit to make sure that calls are made to internal. I mean, I've seen the quick start guide for, I think Eric wrote it for using public ECR. We're getting ready to release internally the private beta of our ECR, just internal beta for us. And so that's what I'll be using the test on. So I'll need a way to verify that I can get to the private ECR registry with credential chains started at the Ursa level using IAM tokens at the pod level. So I've got some more work to do once I get a handle on the private ECR registry. So
That's good. I think if while you test internally, if you need the RC1 spec, we can try to roll it out faster. There are things we can do because we're just holding off because we don't want to break everybody. Rakash is on point to kind of like make sure we can get this updated to RC1 if we want to.
Cool. I mean, I had an issue, if you recall, I had an issue where the current release of the charts were not allowing me to change the Ratify namespace where it got installed. But I just went ahead and went to the file system and installed the charts from there instead of from the chart repo. So that that's working for me now. I worked around that. So anyways, so yeah, that's it. That was all I wanted. It's a kind of an innocuous change. I haven't done any negative testing on it yet, but I don't think it's going to, the documentation for if or says, where I've been reading it, it says, looking at 2 different values, but I think 3 values works just fine. It didn't seem to make a difference here, but all right, cool. That's the only thing I had. I'll stop sharing.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, Jimmy.
Yep.
I think Eric is waiting to be let in. 1 second.
I'll admit him. And then how do I give this back to you?
I think I can
Okay.
take it back. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. All right.
Cool. Okay. Am I here?
Yep, we can hear you, Eric.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the specific ideas I had were around sort of Lee's proposal to decouple the verifier and the referrer store. And I do think that it would be worth some amount of decoupling there, as if the referrer store has to request, or if the verifier has to request anything of the referrer store within it, then we're paying that auth cost, I think, multiple times. And I guess, Akash, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'd have to look see if we serialize just the referrer store config, or if we serialize the entire referrer store when we pass it to verifiers. But part of what I was considering was, I long ago I found this project Go plugin by HashiCorp that you can essentially create a gRPC based plugin interface. And so my idea, and it supports bi-directional communication. So as part of the call to the verifier, if we had an interface, a gRPC interface for calling a verifier from the executor, part of that could be to pass a gRPC handle to the verifier that would allow the executor, or it would allow the verifier to call back to the executor to request stuff from the referrer store. So that way we don't have to initialize the referrer store within every verifier on every verifier call. So I'm going to, I can put some of my thoughts or some of the stuff I found. I put a link in one of the GitHub issues, so I'll see if I can find that. But otherwise, I'll just add a discussion. But if anyone has, any thoughts about that, I sort of felt like that could meet in the middle between decoupling a little bit, but still allowing the verifier the flexibility to request things that it might want to. And it would also mean that we would only have to initialize every verifier one time, and we could leave it running as a plugin for the remainder of the time. So subsequent requests should be faster. So I'll put a link to that I'll see if I can find it in the repo, but otherwise I'll just make a discussion. I can add it to the meeting notes.
Yeah, adding it to the meeting notes would be super helpful. I just added the link that you had sent me about the HashiCorp plugin, but yeah, any other info would be great. And then we can also do the GitHub discussion, so it's visible to everyone. So.
Okay. One other thing I had a question, maybe Sajay knows. Do you know about the progress on the Notary Trust Store?
The trust policy, you mean?
Yeah.
So the trust policy specification has made it in. The implementation is not done. Right now, I believe Millen and folks from AWS are actually planning to implement the trust policy library. So they will give, the idea is that there'll be a full package that you can just use. And roughly speaking, this is where it is. As long as all the certs are mounted at a specific point, From there on, the directory tree structure is in the specification. You can follow that. And then you tell Ratify, hey, this is where my cert hive is in some way, like a location. So it can be a mount point somehow. And you call into the trust policy configuration. Now, I think we'll have to figure out how we will pass that trust policy JSON into Ratify. That's going to be the funky thing here, because it's not going to be it's not a simple binding per se. For example, you can say that for this specific scope, for this image, from this registry location or repository, I want to use maybe this chain of trust or this key. And for another image, I want to be able to use another set of keys. And there's a notion of a trust store and a scope that kind of overlaps. So my hope is once that implementation is done, we would absorb it and we'll queue up a work item that enables that definition to kind of flow through. But we haven't costed it, so we should probably cost it out if that helps.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Because one of the things I was thinking of is how we would absorb that. Because right now we are just going to make a pile of certificates, and we're going to validate that you chain back to one of those, right. The first one that's successful, and then we could give you information about that. But if you cared about more than one, then I don't know if we handle that right now.
No, I think we'll have to rewrite it once the trust policy makes it into Notary Alpha 1. So the other question I had was, you need to pass in the configuration to the verifier, right? Like there's a subset of the configuration that needs to go directly down to the verifier because the executor doesn't know what to do with the Notary trust configuration. This is probably a question for you back, which is, if you were to enable this through some kind of policy mechanism, right? You set policy somewhere else, and you need to kind of flow this down back all the way to the verifier. How are you going to initialize this? Okay, maybe I can give you a backstory of why we did trust policy this way. One of the things that Milan from AWS, what he suggested was the trust policy is kept simple so that disambiguation of certs and where they are stored can be done upfront. Let's say, for example, and the policy is a very simple JSON policy that we want to just flow down. This is configured, and we pass this down to any infrastructure that needs to do this. So let's say if AWS or somebody else were to go build an entire different validator, right? An out-of-box verifier, including things like calling back to a CRL store or a revocation store, then they could just take this as an independent component and pass it down, and the customer would only have to worry about how they configure the scopes and the bindings. The JSON is a manifestation of what finally needs to get used as a part of the library. And we can represent it however we want to, but I think just to keep it consistent, the same policy can be used and just blindly passed down to the Notary verifier. We don't have to invent into that space if we don't have to. Anyway, that's kind of what the backstory is. So maybe we can create at least 2 work items. I don't know whether we have that already.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it because from our perspective, I mean, we support the ability to provide configuration to verifiers, but I didn't know that we had policy within a verifier as really like a first class thing. We just say, all right, put your configuration for the verifier here, and hopefully you know how it works. So like that's where I was, and also if there's too much policy at the verifier level, then the verifier might do things that we can't avoid. And so then if you want to say have policy in Gatekeeper, like if all of your policy wants to live in Gatekeeper, then you would not actually have all of it living in Gatekeeper. Like some of it would technically be living in the Notary v2 verifier like trust policy. So
right. So maybe I can project a portion of the Notary discussion so that maybe everybody here can also get updated on that. Shall I do that?
Sure.
I just made you host.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Will it include when the ORIS authentication libraries are going to make it to Notary and the notation client?
Yes. They're two different items, but both are tracked. So I will. Okay, we can discuss both. Let me see if this is what I want to project. Goodness gracious. Sorry. I don't know what I'm sharing at this point.
I see the trust policy.
Okay, cool. So so this is how we kind of like currently assuming the certs would be stored. You mount it in the specific format where you have a CA and the PEM files. PEMs are expected to be bundled in a particular way, the same way that we've been using it before. And so those kind of things become a little more clearer on how this graph should be, how the directory structure needs to be made. So we'll probably need to kind of like have the Notary verifier give it, this is where the mount point is for XTG config home, and then take it from there and form this directory structure. That's going to be one portion of the change. The second portion is, there are actually two parts to this. There is this notion of a trust store, right? And then there is this trust policy. There are two elements here. The trust store kind of identifies what's the CA, what's the certificate bundle, and things like that it needs to use. And the trust policy says, for this certificate, where all do I need to apply? For in this case, it's registry star scope means apply to everything. But you can then go ahead and specify, for the specific trust store, I wanted to apply to these two images or only scope to this in some way. And there are some other portions like you want to be able to override signature if it is expired, or you can disable things like going back to the Seattle store or to the revocation list and things like that. So that's where this will all evolve over time. But this is where we want to do. And my hope is that we should be able to just pass this entire thing in some way. I don't know, encoded, whatnot. We got to figure something out and just pass it through to the verifier as a pass through from the Ratify configuration side for now. But from a cloud provider specification, that would be a slightly different thing where I don't think customers might want to define it this way. And then you can end up giving a much more easier experience where I want to lock down this registry with the cert, but we'll have to translate it to this model. And that's what we agreed on the Notary side, that each cloud provider would go and implement its own use cases as we want to, but the specification would be on top of a very simplified, disambiguated configuration like this. So the trust store and the trust policy is nothing but JSON configuration. That's what it is in the end. And the whole idea of this specification is nothing but to call out what is required and how the JSON looks. We don't have to specifically worry about it in Ratify because the Notary folks should implement this as a full library. And as long as you can pass this policy and the cert store and include the mount point, sorry, I'm jumping around a little too much. I just noticed that. As long as you can pass in the mount point and give it the correct cert mounted in the correct location and the trust config and the trust policy in, the library should take care of it. That should be the expectation. And there is no offline or there's no other thing that we need to worry about at this point, as far as I understand. Does that make sense?
So
yes.
Does it have to pass it every time?
No, this is a one-time verification, or we need to consider the second part, which is after we instantiate it and we change or add a cert, how do we kind of refresh that? Or if you add a new scope, how do you refresh that? So I think config updates is another scenario, but the specification doesn't talk about config updates from the Notary side. The understanding is that this JSON will get updated somehow, and underlying downstream services need to kind of like assume the configuration update. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah.
We don't have to pass it every time. It can be set up and then we can use that. If you're using a persistent plugin or a long living lifetime plugin, that'll keep running as a gRPC. I think passing this in one time as an initialization should be good enough, or maybe an update to the config would be the second order that we need to think about. I think there was another question about Aura's authentication, right?
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is because there's still the issue I'm seeing where the Docker client, the Aura's client will authenticate with the Aura's distribution registry, but the notation client will not. The issue I'm seeing is a 400 bad request, and then when I look in the logs, I see invalid credentials or whatever is the error message. So I don't know what the difference is between the Aura's client and the Aura's and Docker clients and the notation client. I don't know why they'll work and the notation client doesn't, but so digging, I found that there was a desire to upgrade or update the notary or notation client with the Aura's library. So that's why I want to know where you're at with that.
Yeah, so this is the conversation that's happening regarding the authentication bits. It's so hopefully this should fix it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's being tracked. It's Milind is on the security side from AWS side. So I think the whole idea is that, so the thing that we did do is for Auras, we've kind of completed all the work to land it and remove dependency on containerd, cleaned up a lot of the library and made it like, I think a lot of the work went into making the SDK stable in some ways, and like tests, docs, all the goodness of releasing an SDK. So we're kind of close to an alpha 1. Notation is going to be updated to use that. That fixes all the problems like copy, cache, all the hacks we had to do for containerd and things like that. So all that stuff is gone in many ways. So once that gets updated, the auth problem should also be solved. The one thing that we did discuss as a part of the auth is multiple scopes, because you wanted to log into multiple registries, maybe with different credentials. I don't think Ratify has handled that yet. So we would have to do that. But once the Aura's libraries get updated, notation will also get used the same thing, and then Ratify would just have a dependency on them. So we would not have to worry as long as we pass in the credentials in some manner to the underlying libraries. All of them use the same credential mechanism at that point.
Okay.
So I'm tracking it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that it was being looked at, and I'll test it as soon as something becomes available.
Yeah, the end-to-end won't work otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Well, do we have anyone else have any questions or something wanted to discuss?
That's it for me.
Cool. Well, if not, maybe we can end early this time. All right.
Cool.
Thanks all for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.